In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is abbreviated as GCF. And what you need to know is that the GCF, or greatest common factor, is the opposite of distributive property. So that means when you are talking about the final answer for a GCF, you should have some information on the outside of a parentheses, and then you should have information on the inside of a parentheses. But to kind of get us started, we're just going to do a little bit of a warm-up here with just GCF of one terms only. So on the first one, it says, find the GCF of 18 and 42. So what you're trying to figure out is what is the highest number that goes into both 18 and 42, or if they're different numbers. But anyway, greatest common factor is you're trying to find the highest number that will go into both of them. Now, if you can think of it off the top of your head, fantastic. If you cannot think of it off the top of the head, then you probably want to start listing out. Okay, what are all the things that go into 18? Well, you don't really have to worry about 1 because 1 is never going to be the highest thing. So then 2 goes in there. 3 goes into 18. 4 does not. 5 does not. 6 goes into 18. 7 does not. 8 does not. And 9 does. And then, of course, 18 goes into 18. So now if we look at 42. Well, for 42, you've got 1. Well, of course, remember, we don't really necessarily have to write down 1. So you can write it down, or you can skip that. That's completely up to you. Either way is fine. And then 2 goes in there 21 times. And then 3 goes in there 14 times. 4 goes in there decimal. 5 goes in as a decimal. And then you're at 6, which 6 goes in there 7 times. And of course, 42 goes into 42. So now, once I've made my list, I just go, okay, well, what's the highest number that's on both lists? And everybody says, oh, 6. 6 is the largest thing that goes into 18 and 42. So my GCF would have just been 6 for this problem. Okay, so now let's talk about, instead of numbers, let's talk about letters. So variables with powers. So whenever you have exponents or powers, okay, the GCF is going to be the lowest exponent between the two. Now, if you understand that, fantastic. If you do not, then we'll go ahead and list it out. X to the 4th power means that I have 4 x's. So I'm going to list out 4 different x's. X to the 10th power means I have 10 x's. And then you want to say, all right, well, how many do they have in common? Well, each one has that x. Each one has this x, and this x. So you're going to say, okay, well, how many did I circle? I circled 4 pairs. So that means my GCF is x to the 4th power. Or you can say, all right, x to the 4th, x to the 10th. Which one is the lower exponent? And that would be x to the 4th. So then they would have at least 4 x's in each one. So that's what I mean by lowest exponent. 4 is smaller than 10, so x to the 4th. Okay, so let's just kind of keep practicing this before we get into what our homework problems are going to look like. So we got 10x and 25. So let's go with our coefficients first. 10 and 25. What is the largest number that goes into 10 and 25? And hopefully everybody says, oh, 5 goes into 10 and 5 also goes into 25. Yay! Now, does each one have a variable? This one has an x and this one has no x's. So they don't have any x's in common. So we can't call x a GCF. Okay? So in our case, our answer, our GCF, would only be the fact that each one coefficient, each one, that's what I mean coefficient-wise, is divisible by 5. So now let's go to the next one. X to the 3rd, y to the 2nd, and x to the 5th, y. So let's talk about just x's. I have x to the 3rd and x to the 5th. So since they both have x's, you go with the smallest amount. So what is the smallest exponent they have in common? And that would be x to the 3rd. And now we can look at our y's. They each have a y. Yay. So we can do the same thing. Go with the smallest exponent for y. And that would be y to the 1st or just y. Now, if you're not sure, let me go ahead and do it the longer way. So remember, you could do x to the 3rd, which means 3 x's. X to the 5th, which means 5 x's. And then I can circle this x, and this x. And you say, oh, I circled 3 x's. So that's how I got x to the 3rd. And then for y's, I could do y to the 2nd, which means y. Y is just y. And then you can say, oh, I circled 1 pair of y's. So that's how I got just the y. So if you need a little bit more visual, then make sure you can remember to do that. Here, let's talk about coefficients. 8 and 28. What is the largest thing that goes into 8 and 28? And hopefully everybody says 4. And then we can look at the a's. We have a to the 2nd, a to the 5th. So go with the lowest exponent, which would be a to the 2nd. Okay, D. 12 and 16. What is the highest thing that goes into 12 and 16? Well, that would be 4. Then they each have an a, so go with the lowest exponent, and that would be a to the 4th. They each have a b, so go with the lowest b, which would be b to the 1st or just b. So hopefully you're kind of getting the idea of being able to pick out the GCF. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick out the GCF, and we're also going to tell what we would have left over. So this is what they call factoring out the GCF. Okay, so on A, 20 and 16. What is the largest thing that goes into 20 and 16? Well, hopefully everybody says, oh, 4. 4 goes into both of them. Okay. Does each one have an A? No. So can't say that they have any A's in common. So my GCF is just a 4. Then we're going to open our parentheses and let's state what we have left. 20 divided by 4 is 5. Keep my A attached to that. keep plus sign, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. Now, doesn't this look like something for distributive property? Yes, it does. So remember, we talked about at the very beginning that GCF was the opposite of distributive property. Now, if you want to tell if you're correct or not, you can check your work by using distributive property. If I multiply the 4 back through, I would get 20a plus 16, which should match the original problem. If it doesn't match the original problem, then you know that you are wrong. If it does match the original problem, you know you are correct. Okay, here we got 3 terms. So let's go with the coefficients first. What is the largest thing that goes into 12, 8, and 6? And hopefully everybody says, oh, they're each divisible by 2. Does each one have an x? Yes. So then let's go with the lowest exponent. And what is the lowest exponent? X to the third. So my GCF is 2x to the third. That should go on the outside of your parentheses. And then what's left on the inside of the parentheses? 12 divided by 2 is 6. Now let's see what somebody else remembers from an older unit. With exponents, if we're dividing, what do we do with our exponents? Hopefully everybody says we subtract them. So x to the 5th minus x to the 3rd would give me x to the 2nd. So remember, we're subtracting the exponents. Plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. Subtract your exponents, and that would be x to the 1st, or x. Minus 6 divided by 2 is 3. And if I subtract my exponents, it's 0, which means no x's. So I'm done. Okay, the next problem. Okay, with this problem, you notice that, oh, we are starting with the negative. You are not allowed to start with the negative. If you start with the negative, that automatically means you have a negative in your GCF. Now look at the coefficients. What goes into 3, 12, and 21? And the highest thing that goes into those is 3. Does each one have an x? Yes. So then go with the lowest exponent, which would be x to the 1st, or just x. So negative 3x is my GCF. Open my parentheses. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 turns into positive 1. And then subtract my exponents. 4 minus 1 is x to the 3rd. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. Subtract my exponents. 3 minus 1 is x to the 2nd. Negative 21 divided by negative 3 is positive 7. And if I subtract my exponents, there is no x. Okay, last one here. This one is a little bit tricky because sometimes people have a hard time figuring out what is the largest thing that goes into 100 and 150. If you know the largest thing, fantastic. But I'm going to pretend like I don't know the largest number. So if the largest number doesn't jump out at you, then just pick any number that goes into both of them. I'm going to say, oh, both of these numbers are divisible by 10. 100 divided by 10 is 10. 150 divided by 10 is 15. So now I'm looking at 10 and 15, and what goes into 10 and 15? Oh, well, both of those numbers are divisible by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. 15 divided by 5 is 3. I keep giving you the answer. And then nothing goes into 2 and 3. So if I divided by 10 and I also divided by 5, then I would say, oh, 10 times 5 is 50. So both numbers would have been divisible by 50. So 50 would go on the outside for my GCF. Does each one have an a? Yes. Go with the lowest exponent. So a to the 7th. Does each one have a b? Yes. Go with the lowest exponent, which would be b to the 3rd. Coefficient. Well, we already have the coefficients listed here. We said that's a 2 for the first one. And then taking 7 a's out. So I'm taking all the a's out, so there's none there. Subtract your exponents for b. So 5 minus 3 would be b to the 2nd. Minus, I already got my coefficient here, which was 3. I have 8 a's and I'm taking 7 a's out. So 8 minus 7 is a to the 1st, or just a. And for b, 3 minus 3 is 0, so there is no b's. Done. And the last one we have here, okay, this time I'm still asking you to tell me the GCF and what it looks like. It's just kind of set up in a different way. So what you want to do is you're looking at 9x y to the 2nd and 12x to the 2nd y to the 3rd. Okay, if it helps you, you can think of writing them off here to the side if you want. So what's the largest thing that goes into 9 and 12? Well, hopefully everybody says 9 and 12 are both divisible by 3. Does each one have an x? Yes. So go with the lowest exponent, which would be x to the 1st, or just x. Does each one have a y? Yes. Go with the lowest exponent for y, which is y to the 2nd. Okay, now let's tell me what we have left. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. Subtract your exponents for x's, and there is none. Subtract your exponents for y, and there is none. Plus 12 divided by 3 is 4. Subtract your exponents for x, and you get x. Subtract your exponents for y, and you get y. And now let's talk about how we're going to use that to help us make the answer. Okay? So, the GCF, so this part right here, that's outside my parentheses, that's the GCF. And that is the part that goes over here on the side of my rectangle. So right here, you would put 3xy squared. On the top of the rectangle, this is what you're going to put the part that you have in the parentheses. So on the first question mark, we have, before the plus sign, we have a 3. After my plus sign, that goes for my second question mark, which is 4xy. So now if you want to double check yourself, you can multiply like what we did with the box, and 3 times 3 is 9, and then keep your xy squared, check. 4 times 3 is 12. X times x is x squared, and y squared times y is y to the 3rd. So then these are my final answers for each question mark. Done.